in this video, I'm going to be painting 3 watercolor Christmas cards, and I'm going to take you through the whole process start to finish. So grab your warm beverage of choice or a project that you might be working on, and let's get festive. I'm starting out with what I think is the easiest design out of all 3. It's going to be a snowy Christmas tree. I'm starting this tree with a mid-tone, and I want it to be a really Christmassy green. The greens in this palette are really bright though, so to make them look a little more natural, I usually add in some grays or browns when I'm mixing my paint color, so that's what I'm going to do here. I love this deep green color, but I still think it's a little on the blue side, so I'm going to try to make it look more natural with an even darker green that almost looks black. And I know you can't see this, but I'm mixing the colors on a separate paint palette. Oh yeah, that's better. Okay. I'm intentionally leaving white space because I want it to look like there's snow on the branches. Organic shapes like trees are pretty forgiving as far as shape or symmetry or things like that, so that's why I didn't outline the tree to begin with. I'm just painting loose branches and kind of winging it. I'm using Canson 140-pound watercolor paper that has a smooth finish, so it's perfect for greeting cards. I've already outlined the dimensions of this card in pencil with a fold line in the middle, so I know where the edges of the part that I'm painting are. When these cards are folded, they will be 5 by 7 inches. Next, I want to paint in the snow, which I will outline later in pen so you can really see it. I'm using white with a little bit of blue and gray for dimension. I'm going to go ahead and paint snow on the ground too. For the trunk, I'm going to start with a gray-brown color and then go in with a darker brown for the shadows. Sometimes I have to clean up some messes, but I'm impatient and I don't want to wait for each layer to dry before working on the next one. If you are trying this at home, I do recommend waiting on the snow to dry a little bit longer so your other colors don't bleed into it. While the tree trunk is drying, I'm going to add some even darker shadows to the branches. I'm also working on breaking up the stripiness of the rows of branches. I don't like how even they are, so I'm going to paint some branches lower in some areas. Does it look like snow? I think I need to bring the snow out to the edges of the branches. Now I'm finishing up some shadows in the snow and brightening up the green on the branches. When this is all dry, I'm going to add a lot more definition with pens. For the next Christmas card design, I'm going to paint a more whimsical tree with ornaments and a tree skirt. I'm sketching out the outline of the card and the ornaments. I want to paint the branches first, around the ornaments, so I need to know where those are going to be. I'm also outlining the trunk and the tree skirt, because the tree skirt especially is a difficult shape to freehand. I want it to be nice and symmetrical. I want this tree to be bright and cheerful, so I'm using the lime green color to brighten up the paint mixture that I already have. So there's still some brown paint in it to make it look somewhat natural, but it's definitely going to be more vibrant than the first tree. I'm curving the branches upwards to give the tree that whimsical feel I was talking about. The trunk ended up being off-center, so I'm scooting that over a little, as well as the tree skirt, to make everything even. Now I'm going to mix up some darker greens for the shadows. I want a bright, Christmassy red tree skirt. I think this red is a little too warm though, so I'm adding in some cooler colors like burgundy and a little bit of purple. I want more of a ruby red. It's probably hard to tell on screen, but there is a subtle difference in these two reds. I'm going to fill in the whole tree skirt with this color, and I'll go back in and add more detail later. I changed my mind. I'm going in with the brighter red. Now I'm going to paint the ornaments with some bright, cheerful colors. Okay, I'm going to try this method where I just put the water down first and then I drop the paint color into it. And we see what happens. This method of putting water down first and then dropping the paint into it isn't working how I'd hoped, and I think it's because I don't have enough space to work with inside the ornaments. I'm using too much water for such a small space, and it's bleeding into the colors next to it. I'm just going to paint them like normal. These are not going to be perfect circles, but that's okay. I think once that dries, I'm gonna have to go in and fill the white spots underneath these two. That's bugging me a little bit, but otherwise, I think it's cute. Now I'm gonna go in with my gray-brown color and fill in the trunk. Just like with the first tree, I'm going to add outlines and details with pen once this is all dry. I am going to add some shadow though with the darker brown and let those two colors blend together. I want to give the tree skirt some dimension, so I'm adding a couple details with dark red. The next thing I need to do is add some darker branches to the tree. Since the ornaments and tree trunk are pretty dark, the tree branches now feel too light. And yes, I do realize some of the ornaments are just floating in the air right now, and they're not attached to the tree. Don't worry, I'm going to draw the ribbon that they're hanging from with pen later. In order to make the ornaments look shiny and more three-dimensional, I'm going to add white highlights to look like reflections. White watercolor paint is pretty opaque, so as long as I don't dilute it with too much water, I can paint white on top of the colored ornaments. This design is 3 simple ornaments, 1 round and 2 oblong shaped. I'm tracing a bottle for the round one because who has time to draw a perfect circle by hand? The other 2 might be a little wonky because I am freehanding those, but that's okay. The ornaments will be hanging, so I'm using a straight edge to sketch my vertical lines for the string. I'm starting by filling in each ornament with a solid color. I'm using a lot of water for this layer, so the colors will be very light, and I can also move the paint around how I want to. These ornaments should look three-dimensional, so I'm trying to push most of the paint over to one side to create a shadow. One side should be lighter than the other to create that 3D effect. And sometimes the water will just go where it wants to go, so that will determine which side has the shadow. I'm a little nervous about this part, but I want to make a more interesting and fun background, so I'm going to flick paint by tapping the brush against my finger using the same colors as the ornaments. Of course, I have very little control over where the paint goes, so we will see what happens. Now I'm going to start adding darker shades to create more shadow and depth to each ornament. The gradient won't be 100% smooth, but that's okay. It will still have a nice transition from light to dark once it's dry. Adding more water as I go does help with blending though. I'm going to use a golden yellow color for the metal clasp thingy on top of each ornament. Of course, this yellow is going to bleed into my other colors because, like I said before, I'm impatient and I don't want to wait for them to dry. But I'm going to do my best to keep that from happening. While cleaning up that mess, I'm going to use a paper towel to lift up some of the paint where I want there to be highlights. Now it's time for my third pass on the ornaments, which will be the darkest shadows, and I'm going to use my mid-tone to blend that in a little bit. I think it's worth noting here that my lightest point is not all the way to the right side of the ornaments. It's closer to about a third of the way in. That's why I'm outlining the right side with my mid-tones, so the curve effect continues around on that side. I'm also adding a darker brown color to the ornament clasp thingies. I really need to find out what those are called. After some bright white highlights and a little more splatter paint, I think the painting portion of this card will be done. Now that the paintings are all dry, I'm going to use micron pens to give them more detail, outlines, and dimension. I'm also going to draw the strings for all the ornaments. Of course, it's not necessary to use pens in your watercolor paintings, But I think it's a fun style, and I will say it's much easier to get tiny details with pens than it is with a paintbrush. A good rule of thumb that I go by when I'm doing line art is whenever I want to indicate a shadow, I'll draw a thicker line, and when something is supposed to be lighter or not in shadow, I'll draw a thinner line. This is a good way to show range in value, meaning lights versus darks, even if you're just drawing with pen and not using any color. Alright, so I think this one's done. For the tree branches, I'm not outlining each one or giving them a whole lot of detail. I'm just adding lines along the bottom edge of the darker branches, again where there would be a shadow, and that will give it enough texture. Yay, it's so cute! And last but not least, sometimes it's better to start with a thin line because you can always add to it with a thicker pen later. The problem is definitely knowing when to stop, which I struggle with a lot. I do want to write something down here because I have a little bit of extra space, so this could make it a lot better or a lot worse. Hand lettering can be so nerve-wracking. I've been practicing it for a while, and I wouldn't say I'm great at it. But one trick I actually learned a long time ago in art class was that if you need to center a word, don't start writing left to right. Count the number of letters in the word, then whichever letter is in the middle, start by writing that one in the center of your paper, then you can work your way out from there. I like how it turned out. Now the only thing I have left to do is cut out the cards using a paper cutter and fold them. Super easy. There's no possible way I could mess this up. That was the fold line. Oh no! We're gonna pretend that didn't happen. I cannot believe I cut the fold line. Just right down the middle of the card. Fortunately, it still works, but I probably won't be mailing this card out to anyone. Some paper cutters have a part that will score the paper instead of cutting through it. I highly recommend using one of these for the fold line, unless you know you've already cut a slit down the middle like I did. The second card was harder to fold by hand, so I scored the third one, and that made it much easier. This watercolor paper is surprisingly sturdy. And there you go! Overall, I really like how they turned out. I might tweak some things if I were to do it again, but I still think they turned out super cute. This was a really fun project, and I hope you found some of these tips helpful and maybe are inspired to make your own watercolor cards. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Merry Christmas everyone, and I'll see you next time. Bye!